Hey everyone, this is Corey with Casual EDC, and today I'm going to be bringing you my full review on the Holt knives Haptic. Now I want to give a big thank you to Kevin from Knife Nerdery for sending this guy along. Really appreciate that, Kevin. This is a really neat knife and an expensive knife to just send somebody, so I do really appreciate that, so thank you very much. We'll get some specs out of the way in a second. I just want to show off this knife. You can see, hopefully, can't really see my camera here. This has a dual anodization, so it's purple in some angles, blue in some others. It's most easy to see, I believe, in this area. I'm just going to move it over so I can see on the screen. You can see how it looks more purple on the scale here, more blue, more purple, so on and so forth as you rotate the knife around. So really pretty knife with a very nice milling pattern and that beautiful dual anodization. Now let's set this down here and bring in our bug out as well as the 84mm Victorinox Cadet as our size comparisons here, and I'll read you some specs. So you're looking at a blade length of 3.24 inches, so very similar to the length of the bug out. As you can see, cutting edge is just slightly longer, if not the exact same on the Haptic, with the overall blade length being just slightly longer on the Haptic. Overall, pretty much a medium-sized knife, a little more handle than you get on the bug out, so that's something to keep in mind if you know how the bug out fits your hand. Overall length of 7.41 inches, and this comes in at a weight of 3.7 ounces, which is kind of surprising given how light that it feels in hand. This is very ergonomic and it fits the hand well, and just it doesn't feel heavy. I think that's because a good proportion of the weight is still up in the blade, and despite being full titanium, there is milling on this, but not a ton of milling, so they balance the knife very well. So it's definitely handle heavy, your balance point being back in this area or so, right where the bottom of your pointer finger is going to go. So it's very secure in hand. So this has a hollow grind, which is done very well. You can see that going down there. This blade thins out nicely, not to a crazy thin edge, but a very thin edge, and the apex that's on here is nice and sharp, so this cut extremely well. As I already said, very ergonomic, good landing spot for the thumb with this jimping here, as well as this subtle cutout. It kind of raises up right there. You can see how that juts back up, and honestly I land above the jimping most of the time, right in that area, and it's just enough to kind of tell me that's where my thumb should go. So a nice indicator there. And then the clip doesn't have really any contouring to it, but it has some slight chamfering on the edges. So it melts into the hand very well. No hot spots whatsoever on this guy, except for maybe the bottom of the flipper tab if you're pushing up into it. But just in general use, I had no issues at all. Now, one of the biggest things, and something you probably just saw, as well as the other times I closed it, is the action on this knife. Now, Holt does something they call their adjustable detent system. I did not take this apart. I did not mess with it. I left it tuned exactly as Kevin had it, but there is a screw on the inside here around the detent ball. Allows you to adjust how much detent there is. And I don't know if it's detent or lock bar pressure exactly, but it does change it, so this inset liner lock is stronger or weaker, or slash the detent. I don't know why I said slash out loud. Either it changes the lock bar pressure or just the detent engagement. Not 100% sure which, but it allows you to tune that detent to your liking, and I think this is tuned gorgeously. It's a little bit stiff to open, which is something that I'm not a big fan of, is just how stiff the flipper tab is. But that's been my experience with a couple different Haptics. This is the third one I've gotten to handle. First one I've gotten to carry and use, but the third one I've been able to flip and close. Yeah, so very smooth action, but definitely a little bit of a stiff detent. and it's just dialed in by Holt. I don't know how much work Kevin's done to get it this way, but either way, it just falls shut so nicely and easily, and there's not that much weight in the blade. As you can see, that balance point being back here, right in this area, that's not a lot of weight in the blade. It's a lot of handle, or not very much handle to all that weight of the blade is enough to balance it out. So it's thin is what I'm saying, and it just drops right shut. Get your thumb out of the way and it'll close itself. Crazy smooth, super fun to fidget with, and just enjoyable to close. I'm not worried about this blade, excuse me. I'm not worried about this blade hitting me because the flipper tab hits the thumb. You just get that out of the way and it swings itself shut. Now, speaking a little bit more about the blade, something interesting you'll see here on the back. Here's the way that this is ground. It is thinner in the center, and it tapers out to a wider point right here in this upper quadrant of the knife, and then it thins back out as you get to the point. Hopefully you can see that. Now, why that's interesting is because it's kind of the reverse you'd normally see of a swedge. Typically, if you have a swedge on a knife, like the Benchmade Bugout has one, it tapers to a thinner edge at the point. But in this case, it tapers up to a thicker edge. And it's kind of an odd choice because this is not a blade shape for stabbing and penetrating. So you really don't need the extra beef up near the tip. You're not going to be prying with this knife. I mean, these are between $800 and $1,000 from Holt. I mean, if I just look really quickly at the Haptic galleries, yeah, like 975, 920, 800, 825. Yeah, so expensive knives. So you're not going to be prying with this. You don't really need that meat out of the tip. I mean, unless that is just the perfect amount of weight to get this action, then it's fine. But otherwise, I don't think it was necessary, and I would have liked to have seen this thinned out portion continue and maybe thin out the rest of the tip of the blade. And the reason I say that is because during cutting with this, especially through cardboard and thicker materials, I noticed a significant difference in cutting in this area where the thinned out portion of the swedge is versus the tip. I could feel the resistance increase as I got up into this widened out portion of the blade. And now normally you don't really experience that with a knife. You feel it get easier as you slice through and use the length of the edge. That's how you should be cutting through things. You should, like with any other knife really, you take it full advantage of the edge by pushing and running the knife, not just straight through material like this, but slicing through material. And that's what the belly is for. At the tip, can maintain that slice. And this, of course, as I said earlier, thins out towards the tip. Now, to keep that cutting motion with the Haptic, if you're going to be cutting through material and using that full edge in that kind of a motion, you're going to be met with full resistance here, because you have the full width of the blade from, here to here, just about, the bottom of the cutting edge to here. Sorry about that, just a little interruption there. But as I was saying, the full thickness for this first ½ an inch of the blade or so, and then this thinned out portion for about another 3/4 of an inch or so. Right about here is where it starts to significantly widen up. I'll show that to you in front of my thumb here, in front of my finger, excuse me. And then after that, you start to feel that resistance again, up to this point where you have the full resistance again of the thickness. And on top of that, you're cutting into the grind here by shortening the blade length, by this not being a fully straight blade, not being shaped like this is the Vero Neuron. You can see this this has a little bit of the same thing going on, but this curve's much more exaggerated. So you're getting more towards that edge up here than you are back here. So that full thickness, it's not the same thickness down here in a straight line because that grind is still there, is what I'm trying to say. So it's thinner back here than it is up here. And that just makes for a really odd cutting experience. For me, somebody who's used to utilizing that whole blade to make cuts. Now, for doing push cuts, this section of the blade here, this middle third, is phenomenal. It's nice and thin, like I said, with that hollow grind, and with that thinned out portion from the swedge, you're met with very little resistance. You still have the full thickness in the center here, but you can see it's a rather small area that is engaging with, and that swedge being so thinned out gives that material, when it splits, a place to kind of pull back on itself and stay out of the way, where you're not having continuous drag. So it's very easy to push through material with this middle third of the blade, which is something that once I learned to do that, it made it a very enjoyable experience cutting with this. Now, of course, being a sheep's foot style blade, this has a ton of utility for using the point in a very controlled manner. So opening packages, boxes, and small detailed cuts, very easy to do with the tip of this blade. Something that I found myself doing a lot, which you can even see a box here, is that I cut out shipping labels. I've had this knife for a little, I guess a week or two now. Very, very easy just to drop the point, especially because it has that full thickness. Just kind of drop the point and drag, and it did a lot of the work for me. I didn't really have to push or anything, and it cut right through the paper. Nice and sharp edge. That little bit of weight at the tip certainly helped do that without having to add the extra pressure. But yeah, very utilitarian blade. Not, obviously, like I said earlier, not really for stabbing or for penetrating, unless you're going to really do it at an angle, but makes for great utility cuts and utility use. Though this knife is not really a utility knife. It is certainly an expensive EDC knife that can handle your daily tasks, but I will not be using this for cutting carpet or anything like that. That is for sure. I don't really have much else to say besides that this is an incredible knife, and there's a newer model out from Holt Blade Works called the Morpheus, I believe is what it's called. It's not even listed on their website yet, but I've seen some floating around on Facebook. It's essentially a drop point version of the Haptic with that same hollow grind, and the handle is slightly different, but pretty much the same. So if you're not into the sheep's foot style blades, then take a look at the Morpheus when they become available, and that might be what you want to look at, because the Spectre is the Spectre's larger than the Haptic, I do believe. I'll double check the specs on that. Yes, it is a 3.6 inch blade versus a 3.4 inch blade. Or sorry, 3.2. What did I say it was? I know I'm all over the place. 3.24 here versus 3.6 on the Spectre. The Spectre also has a flat grind. So if you want that cutting ability of the hollow grind, stick with the Haptic or the Morpheus, which to my understanding has the same incredible action, fit and finish, and what you'd come to expect from Holt. That's pretty much all I have for this guy. It's a really great knife. If you have the money and you like flipper-only knives, I highly recommend it. It cuts really well, carries very well, and it's got incredible action. It's not going to be something that I'm going to pick up a version of. I really did think about it, but flipper only is just not my thing. So I won't be having one of these personally in the collection, but I'm certainly going to miss playing with this when I send this back to Kevin. So a big thank you again to Knife Nerdery for sending this my way, and thank you all for watching. Have a great day and take care.